Welcome back. Today we're going to be building a parametric wall builder for our facades or house plans. Now, I'll give you a quick demo of this before we dive right in. And if you haven't seen the previous video based on the bricks, check it out because we're going to use it at the end of this and combine them together. So, to get started, let's have a quick look. We want to be able to control our wall height here. Also, we have a plaster on the inside of this wall. Now we can also control the plaster thickness. So at the moment I've just got it set to 10 millimeters. And also the thickness of the external wall. So depending on your plan, sometimes they'll have them slightly wider or thinner. You can match them to the plan. As an example, we can come right into our internal wall there. Also, we want to be able to have our windows parametric to this wall. So if we have, for example, our spline shape, just take note of the boundaries I've put here. I'll explain this shortly. We can now extend or change the size of our windows, and all the wall will align with it. Same goes with any of our walls or windows here. That's our boundary. Also note for a later lesson, this is our window type. It also adjusts automatically. Alright, so let's get into it. Alright, so let's build our floor plan shape. We'll just test it with a box to begin with. Okay, so let's build our wall piece. In this case, it doesn't really matter how big it is because we're going to be controlling all those variables within Railclone itself. But important to give ourselves a material for now. One for the internal and one for the external. Okay, let's apply that to our wall. And build our Railclone. So we're going to be setting it up with a linear array for this piece. And also let's label this so it makes it easier for us later. Floor plan, wall. Okay, we're going to pick the floor plan. And let's move that to the side because we're going to make quite a few of these arrays. And it helps to have a bit of a clean start. And let's pick our wall piece. Now, as per usual, we're going to be doing some transforms to the wall. So let's put this in now and to our default. Let's have a look at how that's looking. Good. You can see it's in the center of this line. Now, what we want to do is put it on the inside part of the line. Now, I'm going to do that before the transform because we want every other piece, such as the wall interior, to work from that offset. So, let's adjust the alignment. Bottom is what we want. You can have a look through. Top, we put it on the outside. Bottom's going to put it on the inside. It's also sitting on top, so we don't really need to adjust our pivot for the Z height, but you can if you like to keep it a pivot. We're just going to leave it automatic for now. Now, we have this repeating. Let's have this scale across. Much less geometry required. And it works for this situation quite well. Okay, we're going to call that exterior. Okay, so we want to adjust the height. So let's have a look. Alright, this is adjusting the thickness. We're going to need that soon as well, so that's handy. And this adjusts the height. Great. So let's export those two. And before we go any further, let's define what we actually want to do with the wall. Now, these numeric nodes will be what the user inputs. So we want them to have control of the wall height. And we'll have that in seniors. Let's copy and paste that. Wall thickness. We want to control the plaster thickness. And you don't know about this one yet, but we're going to have a capping. I'll explain that later. Let's focus on these three for now. Okay, so we know our Z fixed size was our height, so let's put that in. And our thickness was the Y fixed size from playing around with these two. So now we should have these inside our editor. We have the wall height, so let's set that to something standard like 2600. And the wall thickness, let's say 200 mil in this case. You can make it 100, whatever you want. You can check it's working. Okay, so now let's apply our material to the Railclone, and we can see already it's applying materials per the inside and outside of the geometry. Now we can easily fix that by going to our object, and we'll put a material ID of 1 so that it's always going to use 1 across the whole object. But for our interior wall, let's change that to ID 2. 2 to 2, ID 2. And we'll call this ID 2. If we check our material editor, you've got exterior, interior. Okay, so let's make another one of these, and we're going to call this the interior wall. Now we're going to also be doing some transforms, which save us on geometry, as we can reuse the same box and adjust the size of it. So to begin with, let's check the alignment, because it's sitting on the outside, halfway through the outside of this wall. Let's move that. Actually, what we'll do, let's see if we can find another way of moving it. Okay, we can use a padding to shift it. This way we don't get too many different transforms going on. We'll keep the same pivot from our wall, the same alignment, sorry, and we'll move it by the thickness of that wall. So we can already see here when we go to 200, it's placing it on the inside of our external wall. So let's expose that, and we can plug in the thickness of our wall. So that means now we can just check every time we adjust the thickness of the wall, it adjusts the padding of the internal wall. Now obviously we don't want it that thick, so back to experimenting. Alright, cool. We want the Y size to be controllable. We'll call that the plaster thickness. And the Z height should pretty much match the external wall. unless you want it different for some other reason. So let's expose those two. Wall height into the Z height, plaster thickness into our Y fixed size. So now if we go to our plaster thickness, we can set this to 10 mil, and we have our plaster thickness. And that should always follow the inside of our wall. Great. Okay, so now it's probably a good idea to give yourself a bit of room. We're going to need to add a few more nodes here. And let's give ourselves a note for the future. This will be wall main, and you can write yourself a note. Okay, let's build the first part of the wall that's going to cut a hole for our windows. So essentially all the work's been done in these two, so we can just copy and paste these down, and we're going to create a clipping spline segment. Now, so that we don't cut a hole all the way through, what we're going to do is split up our sections into ID 2, 3, 4, 5, as the space spline is already ID 1. Now, by doing this, it allows us so that when we cut a hole in this wall, it doesn't cut a hole in that wall, and for there and there. So, the way we do this is, first let's use something the user will recognize straight away. Possibly the view cube is a good idea, because you have north, east, south, and west. We can base our IDs on that. So, this being the south, we can call this south. Now, you're going to have to also come up with a ID system as to which side is 1, 2, 3, 4, or 2, 3, 4, 5, sorry. I'm just going to go with left to right. So this side will be 2, this side will be 3, this side will be 4, this side will be 5. And we will do this using a material ID of the spline, not of the wall. The wall uses a material ID 1 and 2. This is not related. So I'll show you how this works. Let's grab our spline. Let's check the whole thing is ID 1. Correct. So now let's make an area, and this will be ID 5. This would be ID 2. 3, 4, 5. I'm just going to show you 2 for now, and you can go ahead and do the rest as per how we're doing these 2. So this will be using the ID 5 of the spline. And this will be our clipping area. Now take note, x-axis, so this will be ID 2 and 4, and on the y-axis it'll be 3 and 5. So we know for our clipping mode we want to exclude on the y. We'll have to do the same for this. Now let's pick our shape. Okay, now that we've picked our shape, we can see it's cut the hole, but there's a problem here. Now, if we isolate what's going on for a moment, we can see that our first wall is going all the way through our spline there. It's actually working on our one piece that we just made. So we know it has to do with these two. Now if we look at this, we can tell that it's not using material ID 1. So let's set that. And now we have our wall working as expected. So now we're missing this part of the wall because that's ID 2. So before we move on to that, let's just check everything's working with our current piece. And you can see, excellent, that's working within our designated area. Note that because we're cutting a complete hole, if you go over the boundary, it'll cap it with ID 1, which is the side of that wall. You'll have to take note of this later. I'll show you where that can actually be a problem. But for now, what we can do is we can say, all right, I'm going to build an internal capping piece for that wall. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's build another generator. Where's our linear? There we go. Okay, and we'll call this capping. Okay, for this one, we'll actually use the shape of that spline we made for our wall piece. Now, we'll use the internal wall, if you choose, and we'll make a transform, because we're going to take that same wall piece again, and we're going to make it run along the inside of this edge. So, let's plug that into our default segment, and you can see it's starting to do what we need it to do. So, first of all, let's have a look at our fixed size here. Okay, that's not what we want. Okay, good. This is adjusting the thickness. So we already know we want to be able to adjust the capping thickness with that. Do we need the Z? Yes, we do. Okay, so first of all, we know that for the thickness of this capping piece, we're going to need the external wall plus the internal wall, plaster, as we've called it. So that'll be for our Z. So let's expose those two and add an arithmetic for our Z. So that'll be the plaster thickness and the wall thickness for our Z fixed. Excellent. Okay, now for our Y size, we'll just let the user pick that. So they can just come into here and say, oh, I want it to be 2 mil around that edge, or 1 mil. It's just a capping, so you can do that as you wish. I'm going to leave it at 2 mil. Okay, all well and good. Now, you'll notice the position needs to be shifted to the inside of that wall. So, let's see if we could do that through the transform first. And we'll have a look at our alignment methods. Okay, so the top of the Z seems to be where we need it. However, you can see it's going through our wall piece. So let's have a look. No, correct. Let's check that. Great. So now you have a capping piece. Again, you can notice it's tiling. So let's go into our generator and change that to scale. So now we can make this capping as thick as thin as you want. And it's all based off the one piece of geometry. Okay, so now let's go over to our wall piece here. This is ID 2. So let's first of all clean things up a little bit so you know where you're at. And we'll give ourselves another note. Okay, let's start making it a little bit better for our user. We'll call this material ID 5, and when you're setting yours up, it's probably best to start with 2, 3, 4, 5 in order. For this case, I'm just going to keep moving to show you how it works. So let's copy all that and paste it down. I'm going to call this material ID 2. Let's make these a different color, just to separate our main from our repeating pieces. So give yourself or your user a note. This is the west facing wall, ID 2. This is the south facing wall, ID 5. Okay, so let's call this one west, going by our view cube here. Let's build another rectangle. Actually, let's go with something a bit more interesting. Okay, so all we have to change here is the limits. This will be ID 2 now, ID 2. And within our base objects in our material editor, now we have spline, not good. Let's change that to floor plan. So we now know this will always be our floor plan spline. This is our south side. This is our west side. So our west window, let's select that. And immediately notice that it's not working. That's because we have to remember we are on the x-axis. So within our linear generators, make sure you select the x-axis. Excellent. So now we have our windows. You can change the shape, whatever you want. So let's put it into practice. We've got our floor here, and I've just traced a small part of the floor. So let's grab the Railclone now and select our floor plan piece. You can tell, here's another interesting point you have to make sure you're aware of, is that when you build your spline, depending on if you go from left side to the right side or the right side to the left side, then your floor plan might be inverted. So just select the whole spline and reverse. Now this is all ID 1, so let's set this to ID 5 based on our front elevation here and our garage. And now we can create these windows. I've just traced these 3 at the moment. I'm just going to rotate them up. And we're going to select our south window. And we've selected the wrong one. Let's try that again. Alright, now you'll notice that the holes work. However, the capping will always go around the hole. So make sure if you're going to use the capping that it's aligned to that specific wall. And you'll have your pieces cut out. So now you'll notice there's a couple of errors here, and you just have to make sure that when you select your IDs, you'll notice that this is 5, but this is also 5, and that's 1. So they're not meeting well. If you change these back to 1, it'll close the gaps properly. Same with these. Just be thorough when you're setting it up. If you come across it, you'll know how to fix it at least. That should get you off to a good start. And enjoy, because once you've set it all up, it'll look a little bit something like this. And you'll be able to build the walls very quickly, and makes it a lot easier when materialing and when you're in a hurry and you need to render. So the last thing we're going to do here is you can then take your wall piece and I'm just going to duplicate that into a piece of geometry here. And Railclone have a little script where you can apply your Railclone to faces. So let's take our brick and we're going to pick that, and we're going to pick our object and apply to the faces. It takes a little bit because it's got to break apart each piece of geometry, apply a spline, and then apply that to a spline, so just be careful. And now you have your brick leading along your facade. Alright, hope that has given you something to play around with, and enjoy.